Oh, and welcome to We'll Tell You What We're Reading from the Waltham Public Library. This is our monthly YouTube show where we talk about what we're reading. This is also part of our book club series, and we are going to have a few book clubs on Zoom coming up. I like to read those to you. Coming up next Monday on February 7th, Louise, as well, and another of our coworkers will be talking about Tell Us What You're Reading, in which you can join them on Zoom and talk about books that you're reading. On Saturday, February 12th, there will be a discussion of Blacktop Wasteland by S.A. Crosby at 10 a.m. On Monday, February 14th, my colleague Greg on this call will be leading a discussion for the Science Fiction and Fantasy Book Club, The Lesson by Caldwell Turnbull. And on Wednesday, February 16th, I will be leading a discussion on the book The Mothers by Britt Bennett. We read her book, The Vanishing Half, just about a year ago, and it was great. We had a great turnout. So we're hoping for her first novel, we actually get a turnout as well. Again, my name is Laura Bernheim, and I'm joined by my colleagues, Liz Rior, Louise Goldstein, and Greg Carter. Please look in our YouTube channel, like and subscribe for all sorts of content. And as always, a big thank you to the friends of the Waltham Public Library who make these possible. And without further ado, we are going to tell you what we're reading. So always be patient while I share my slides, and here we go. So my first book is Black Cake by Charmaine Wilkerson. This is actually set to come out tomorrow, February 1st, or tomorrow if you're watching this the day of recording. We're recording this on January 31st. So congratulations. If you're watching this on Friday, it's been published. Yay! Anyway, I was lucky enough to read an advanced reader copy of this, and I have really enjoying it. This is a book about estranged siblings and the adult son and daughter of Eleanor Bennett, Byron and Benny. They must come together after the death of their mother. Benny and Brian took different paths in life, with Byron taking the more traditional, shall we say, path of college, as well as having a profitable career, and Benny not staying in school and still deciding what she wants to do, something that very much aggravates her brother. Eleanor leaves behind a recording with her friend and lawyer, referred to as Mr. Mitch, that requires Benny and Brian to listen together before enjoying her famous black cake, a Caribbean rum cake. During the recording, their mother makes a reference to their previously unknown sister, dun, 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 and starts to tell a story starting in the 1960s about a woman, Covey, who grew up in the Caribbean and was forced to make some very hard life choices. The book then goes back and forth between Covey's and the present Bennett siblings' points of view in the third person, as well as the past and present day. Other characters also have the chance to have their voices heard, such as Mr. Mitch, Covey's father, her best friend Bunny, and some others. If you like descriptive sentences, as well as books with a strong sense of place and well-developed characters, I highly recommend this book. The chapters are fairly short, so the pace is quick as well. One possible minor for some, the changing point of view among 6+ characters and the time setting changes are very rapid. It didn't particularly bother me, and I thought it was broken up in a way that I was able to follow without an issue, but I think it could possibly confuse some readers. And once again, I know this is a theme with all my books, it seems anyway, but there are a lot of references to food, especially the black cake of the title, which sounds amazing, and I definitely want to make it. I've found a lot of recipes for it. So once again, please be very careful reading this if you're hungry. I don't recommend doing that. Did you know that under the right circumstances, a producer can make more money with a flop than he could with a hit? If he were certain that that show would fail, a man can make a fortune. If you just understood that reference, then you'll enjoy my second book, All About Me, My Remarkable Life in Show Business by Mel Brooks. I just want to say I originally wanted to read this in a sort of Spaceballs, the breakfast cereal kind of voice. You know, Mel Brooks, the biography, Mel Brooks, the lunchbox, Mel Brooks, the t-shirt. It's where the real money is made. Okay, now that you all know I can quote Mel Brooks movies. Mel Brooks, famed comedy writer, producer, director, and sometimes actor, has what seems like a million stories in this fun-filled and mainly positive memoir about his life. If you enjoy Mel Brooks's humor, then you'll be right at home with this book, and you'll enjoy it even more as an audiobook since he narrates it. If you don't like his humor, you're not going to like this. I don't know what else to say to you, but what's wrong with you if you don't? Just kidding. The audiobook actually starts with an overture, very similar to a Broadway musical, which, I mean, he had me literally at the beginning. He goes into details about his movies, making me either want to revisit ones that I haven't seen in a while, such as History of the World Part 1, or see ones that I've missed. High Anxiety. Yes, I know. How can I call myself a Mel Brooks fan and never have seen High Anxiety? I don't know. My big shame. His anecdotes about so many of his close friends and loved ones who have passed on, such as his comedy partner, Carl Reiner, or his wife, Anne Bancroft, are both touching and funny. I love the description of his courtship of Anne Bancroft, especially. She sounds like she was able to go basically toe-to-toe with him in terms of wit. I do have to say one, I don't know if caveat is the right word, but there's one very, very brief part that I quite frankly wasn't sure how to take. And that was a reference to a co-writer of his from the Sid Caesar's Your Show of Shows, who also, this person also became a director and comedy filmmaker in his own right, and is often compared to him, even though I think their humor is totally different. No, I'm not naming this person, except to say the person is problematic. You can probably figure it out if you haven't by now, or just go on the Internet Movie Database and look up Your Show of Shows. Unlike most of the people who Brooks encountered, he talks about this person very briefly. Most other people he'll go on and on about. This person he talks about very briefly, but positively, basically one or two sentences that just says they got along. It's pretty much you'll miss them if you blink. And it does not mention any of the this other director's controversies. I get that this was a bit of an elephant in the room situation, especially since these two are so often compared and had a very similar trajectory, and age-wise are not that far apart in age. So it probably would have been weird not to mention this person, but I have to be honest, I kind of wish he hadn't said anything. But I did thought it was important to mention that it isn't in there, although all very brief. That aside, I did enjoy the book for the most part. And I need to see the movie The Producers, which is one of my favorite movies, the original one, for probably what's going to be the 185th time. So my last book is the memoir of Rita Moreno. I referenced Moreno in our last episode when I talked about my review of the new West Side Story. And although I've always been an admirer of her, I didn't know too much about her personal life. Like the Brooks memoir, I listened to this on audio since Moreno narrates it. Born Rosa Alverio in Puerto Rico, Rosa moved to New York with her mother at a very young age and later embarked on a show business career that frankly should have been even more prolific than it already is. So the lack of roles available to her as a Latina woman, or frankly, the abundance of too many roles in which she was asked to play, in her words, her voice is so honest, talking about her very real struggles, not only in Hollywood, but also with mental health issues. I love her rawness, in which she talks about her marriage to Dr. Leonard Gordon, so not an actor. You can definitely tell that she was very much in love with him, but also there were some real problems, and she doesn't shy away from talking about them. The description of his death and illness are so heartbreaking. I was almost crying when listening to that part of the book, even though I don't know of her husband as anyone, frankly, other than Rita Moreno's husband. She's also very frank about people she came across in Hollywood, including Natalie Wood, her, in my opinion, and Rita Moreno's miscast co-star in 1961's West Side Story, and Marlon Brando, with whom she had an affair and was not well treated. Moreno was and is also a huge activist, becoming heavily involved in the civil rights movement, for example. And of course, to me, she'll always be the, hey, you guys, lady from the electric company. The only issue with this book is that it's 9 years old. So recent projects, such as the remakes of One Day at a Time, West Side Story, are not included in here, as well as other ventures she's done since 2013. Anyway, those are my books. I am now going to pass it on to Louise.
Thank you, Laura. I definitely want to read the Mel Brooks book. Okay, let's see. Let me just back this up. Okay. I want to start with this book. It's called The Circle by Dave Eggers. I have not read other books by Dave Eggers except the two I'm going to talk about today. The critics don't all agree with me, but I loved this book, The Circle. It was published in 2013. This is kind of, this one and the one I'm going to talk about next, they're kind of parodic novels. They're parodies of the world we live in with big tech monopolies and everybody on, things like Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Google, all of it. And what he's done is he's created a company called The Circle. And when I read about this company, I'm kind of picturing Google when it started, all these idealistic, very smart people, and kind of the way things have gone to the point where, we're all worried about our privacy and everybody's liking and tweeting and, sending emojis and so on. So he's created this whole world called The Circle. And they have all these things. He gives them kind of funny names. I really find it kind of funny. This is like a darkly funny book, I think. One is called True You, TRUYOU. Everybody has one account, one identity, one password, one payment for all platforms, all apps. Everybody's on that. And the wise men, they're called, who are kind of in charge of The Circle, is subsumed Facebook and Twitter and Google, and he made up some other ones that had subsumed. One he called Zoop and one he called Quan. He just made those up. And there are all these quotes from The Circle, like, transparency leads to peace of mind, and privacy is theft. Secrets are lies, sharing is caring. And the main character in The Circle, her name is May, and she becomes an avid member of The Circle. She buys the Kool-Aid about The Circle. She loves it. She'll do anything and everything. And she goes transparent. And a lot of the politicians do this as well. And what that means is you're being filmed all day, every day, except maybe when you go to the bathroom and when you're sleeping, that's it. So she's totally live and she's narrating to people all the time. And it's kind of becoming like, if you're not willing to be transparent, like if you're a politician, you're not going to go anywhere. And in fact, politicians who speak up against this circle, well, some kind of scandal is come upon, or something happens to sort of make them look bad, and they're out. So basically you're kind of stuck in the circle, whether you like it or not. And then he followed it up with a book called The Every, because The Circle and Amazon have joined forces, and now it's The Every. And there's a young woman who gets a job at The Every, and the reason she gets the job, her name is Delaney Wells, she wants to take down The Every. She wants to take it down. She doesn't like that everyone everywhere is being watched, no matter what they do. And she's going to try to take it down. And one of her schemes is to create these apps and ideas that are so ridiculous and repulsive that everybody will be like, oh no, this is crazy, and start rebelling against The Every. Except every idea she comes up with, everybody goes for it, even though they're so crazy. She comes up with something called Hear Me, which is designed to preempt abusive behavior, supposedly, but it means no matter where you are, no matter if you're having an argument with your spouse, no matter what it is, they can hear you. You can be heard, and then the police will come if they think something bad is happening. So your privacy is being taken away. There's one called Friendy, to analyze your facial expressions, your eye contact, and to tell what your real intentions are. So friendships are breaking up, but everyone wants to use it anyway, Friendy. Everyone's just so busy with all these apps and all the obligation of friending and liking and zinging and zapping. And I found it very darkly funny myself. I really, really liked it. I couldn't stop reading these books. I could not put them down. That's me. And my third book, this is Louise Erdrich, who's a fine, fine writer. And one of our book clubs, the Initiating Inspiration Book Club, just read this book, The Roundhouse. This is a beautiful book. I really recommend it. I do want to give a warning, though, that it is about sexual abuse, and it's a bit upsetting. It's not a light story. It's a beautiful story. And as with all, well, I've only read 2 of her books. As with both of the Louise Erdrich novels that I've read, there is humor. She finds humor. She creates all kinds of quirky, lovable characters. If you read for character, she's a really good bet, Louise Erdrich. Beautiful characters. Our main character is Joe, who's 15 years old. They live on the reservation, and unfortunately his mother is raped, and it's about him and his father coming to terms with the rape. And, you know, unfortunately the statistics are rather alarming for Native American communities and the safety of Native American women. Very high risk rate. It's something crazy like 82% or something of the women get, you know, have some kind of a sexual incident, not voluntary. And anyway, Joe, did I say he was 13? He's 13. I hope I didn't say 15. He's 13 years old, and he's trying to figure this out with his friends, and he's only 13. So this is a really heavy thing to be dealing with. Beautiful, amazing book. I really recommend it, with that one caveat: if you really don't want to read this subject, which I totally understand, this may not be the best Louise Erdrich to pick. And with that, I'm going to move on to our next person, which I believe is Liz. Liz, you're next, right? I'm going
am, yes.
this year. Yay, there we go.
All right. Hi, everybody. I hope you're all doing well. Let me get my slides started for you. So I have 3 books for you today. The first book I have is Frog and Toad Are Doing Their Best, Bedtime Stories for Trying Times, a parody by Jenny Egerty and illustrated by Ellie Hajdu. So I grew up reading the classic children's series Frog and Toad by Arnold Lobel. For those unfamiliar with the original Frog and Toad series, the titular Frog and Toad are 2 anthropomorphic amphibians who live together and have charmingly silly yet mundane adventures. This book, Frog and Toad Are Doing Their Best, is sort of a modern reimagining of what Frog and Toad would be dealing with during the era in which we are all currently living. They have to deal with everything from working from home and having a wireless router that's on the fritz, picking a restaurant for dinner when you're both really hungry but don't know what you want to eat, the small joys of winning $5 on a scratch-off ticket, and eating lots and lots of cookies because you had a bad day and you need cookies. I loved this book. I found it very relatable, which may or may not be a good thing. Frog and Toad are vulnerable, insecure, goofy, bumbling little dorks, and I see so much of myself in them. Highly recommend it. If you want to laugh, it's a very quick read. It was just a really nice little palate cleanser of a book. My next item is Electric Idol by Katie Robert. As you can see, Entertainment Weekly called this book unspeakably hot. And I agree, it's very spicy. So this is the second book in Katie Roberts' Dark Olympus series. The first book, Neon Gods, is a contemporary sort of urban fantasy retelling of the Hades and Persephone myth. It's really good and very spicy, and I loved it. So I read the second one, Electric Idol, and I think it is a very solid and sexy follow-up novel. It is a contemporary urban fantasy retelling of the myth of Psyche and Eros. So the original myth of Psyche and Eros is there's a prophecy that Psyche will be married to a horrible monster, and she is left on top of a mountain, and I'm butchering this, so my apologies, but she's left on top of a mountain, the monster gets her, but she can never actually look at the monster. It's always in the dark. And then one day she does, because her sisters tell her to, and it turns out it's actually Eros/Cupid, and he's so beautiful, but then they can't be together because she broke her word, and blah, 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 blah. That is not how the myth goes in this retelling. In this, so Olympus is a very secluded city ruled by the 13, aka the 13 major gods of Greek mythology, who are led by Zeus. And like any good pantheon of deities, some of the 13 really dislike each other and are always jockeying for power. So Eros is the son of Aphrodite. Aphrodite is one of the 13. Psyche is the daughter of Demeter in the story, not in the mythology, the real mythology. And Demeter is also one of the 13. Aphrodite and Demeter hate each other. So Aphrodite puts a hit out on Psyche to teach Demeter a lesson, because what better way to show you're powerful than by killing your enemy's children? Am I right? Don't do that, by the way, just like avoid it. In an effort to save Psyche's life, Eros convinces Psyche to marry him in a classic marriage of convenience trope. But the kicker is that Eros was actually supposed to be the one to kill Psyche. Like Aphrodite legit said, cut her heart out and bring it to me. And Eros was like, what if we got married instead? It's kind of like bringing a heart to her, except the heart is love. Anyways, this does not please Aphrodite, does not please Demeter. And as it turns out, even though they get married, Aphrodite still wants Psyche dead. So I really enjoyed this novel. It has a very high spice level, so content warning, very sexy. And I think what I like the most about it is that the lead is a plus size woman, which you don't see a lot in mainstream romance, I personally feel. Robert did a really great job of like honoring plus size bodies and you know, normalizing different shapes and sizes and showing how people can be sexy no matter what size they are. There's like a billion plot holes and loose ends, but when you're reading a romance novel about Greek gods, like, do you really care? I don't. So I recommend it. My last book is The Stranger in the Woods, The Extraordinary Story of the Last True Hermit by Michael Finkel. This book. I picked this book up because I wanted to get a sense of isolation from the world. We live in a very overwhelming time, and even though we're mostly required to stay in our homes, you know, you still want to get out and escape. So I picked up this book. But honestly, reading this book for me was kind of like an uncomfortable, voyeuristic cringe fest, mainly due to the writing style of the author. So, backstory. In 1986, Christopher Knight walked into the woods of Maine. He lived there in complete isolation with one brief encounter with someone where literally he only said hi. And that's it, for 27 years. He survived there until 2013, when he was arrested for breaking into a local summer camp and countless cabins so that he could steal supplies, food, propane tanks, clothing, radios, and lots of books. He survived 27 winters in Maine without ever lighting a fire, according to him, because lighting a fire would give away where his campsite was, which, as it turned out, was on private property from someone who, in that nearly 30-year period, never realized he was living there. So Finkel's book is a very uncomfortable biography of Chris Knight. Neither Finkel nor Knight come across as particularly sympathetic people. Much of Finkel's source material comes from visits with Knight at the Kennebec County Correctional Facility, where he was held between his arrest and trial. He only visited Knight 9 times for 1-hour sessions and managed to write an entire book about him. He conversed with him by letter a little bit too. After Knight was released from jail, even though Knight was like, please leave me alone, and his family was like, please leave us alone, Finkel continued to hound him and pursue him for the story. And I felt really icky actually reading this book about a man who just wanted to be left alone, and this journalist who was like, oh, there's a story here. I'm going to follow this story, even though it means violating this person's privacy. And if he lived alone for 27 years, clearly privacy is something he values. Knight himself doesn't come across particularly well. He seems kind of arrogant and rude, but that's probably just from being in isolation for so long. And ultimately, I don't recommend this book, primarily because the author just gave me a bad feeling, and I didn't particularly enjoy the writing style. But I did finish it approximately 20 minutes ago when I was finishing up my lunch. So boom. And now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Greg. So Greg,
Thank you. All right. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to read a ton this past month. I managed to get 2 books down. Well, let's get to it. Like Liz, I read a book that was about gods, though this one, instead of being based around Greek myths, this was more about the Nordic ones. I actually managed to pick up Neil Gaiman's Norse mythology. It's kind of funny. I really like Neil Gaiman, but I never really got around to reading this. I'm not sure why. It's also, which is made all the more crazy because Norse mythology was actually introduced me by the writings of Neil Gaiman. When I was a kid, I read The Sandman, which is a hodgepodge of all sorts of world mythologies. And, you know, when I was reading about the myths of Loki and Thor, I thought, oh, that was interesting, and got into it. So long story short, this is pretty much Neil Gaiman taking Nordic myths and doing his interpretation of storytelling. He takes them, you know, Nordic myths, and puts his own spin on it. I liked it. I didn't like it as much as I thought I would. It might be, which is not necessarily saying don't read this book, you won't like it, because that's a little unfair, because I think it's more of the fact that I have listened to these stories time and time again, and I really find them interesting, but it's just, I guess I thought I was going to expect something a little bit more. It's really focused around 3 of the main, I mean, it's pretty much about all the Nordic gods. For those of you who don't know, the Norse gods were pretty much, and this is a very, very broad explanation, were like a pantheon of deities who were worshipped in several places of Scandinavia, and it focuses on mostly all of them, but 3 in particular: Odin, who is the king of the gods, the Lord of wisdom and war; Thor, his son, who is the god of lightning and thunder, and kind of acts as like the bodyguard and protector of Asgard and the gods. When giants and monsters show up, he's the one who reminds them that you know, he's the number one you know, brawler, and pretty much like crushes them pretty easily. And then there's Loki, who's definitely the most interesting of the characters. He's a trickster. He's not Odin's son in this one. He's actually Odin's like friend and blood brother, so to speak. He's the son of giants, which kind of makes things a little bit complicated with the gods, because on one hand, he's, you know, really good chums with the Lord of all, but on the other hand, he's like the son of their mortal enemy. But the gods let him hang around because, well, he keeps things interesting. A lot of the stories kind of veer about Loki getting the gods into trouble and then trying to get them out of it. There's one particular story where Loki shaves off the hair of Sif, who's Thor's wife, and it's pretty horrific. And they ask why he would do such a thing, and he just kind of shrugs and says, "I was drunk." So that should give you an idea of what Neil Gaiman's interpretation of Loki is. And I say interpretation because Loki, Norse mythology, like, and myths and folklore and stuff can be interpreted in many different ways. And in this one, Loki's very much like a straight on jerk who you can see a mile away from things coming. You have sympathetic moments for him because a lot of the other characters aren't especially nice. Thor is made out to be kind of a complete simpleton who is just like, you know, I have a hammer, I smash up monsters, and I call it a day. And it's the gods are kind of vain and can be very vain, very petty, get into all sorts of nasty situations. But that also is kind of the point. You know, kind of Aesop's for, I guess, humans to look around and see that. So if this isn't an interpretation of the gods that you like, I totally get it and understand. But a lot of people, Neil Gaiman's very, nonetheless, is always a very talented author. There is one part of the book that made me laugh out loud, and that is Neil Gaiman's explanation of where we get poetry, both good and bad. I am not going to tell you about it because A, I don't want to ruin the story, and B, I want to try to keep this a PG, meeting at best. It's pretty crude. But yeah, so I liked it. Not as much as I thought it would, but I liked it. So my second book is Aaron Mackey's World of Lore, Dreadful Places. For those of you who don't know who Aaron Mackey is, he runs a pretty popular podcast called Lore, which kind of delves into superstitions, ghost stories, and folklore, surprising nobody, throughout the world. So he pretty much delves into like a horror story that a local place has, and then kind of dissects where that story came from, what's the historical relevance of it, and how it got interpreted to what we view it as today. For those who know me, they know that I love two things. I love history and I love horror stories. So combine those two together, chef's kiss. He has 3 books right now, which is focused the first one's Monstrous Creatures, which is about monsters and folk stories. There's one about Wicked Mortals, which focuses on people whose crimes are so awful and such like that they've almost kind of transcended to superstitions. And then there's this one, Dreadful Places, which focuses on the myths and legends pertain to a certain location. So he has several chapters that focus on Richmond, Detroit, New York City, several castles in England, a number of caves in South America, and just kind of looks into like the history and numerous tales that are kind of associated with them, and comes up with all sorts of interesting myths and facts that I didn't know. For example, I had no idea that Detroit has a myth believing that dating back to its creation, there is apparently a malevolent spirit or red dwarf that has been around for every disaster and caused fires and flames, and it's just it's a really weird one. The Red Dwarf of Detroit. Look it up. It's wild. But unsurprisingly, his strongest points in this book are when he focuses on New England, because Aaron Mackey happens to be a native of New England. So he focuses a lot on the Bridgewater Triangle, which for those who don't know, is a place in southeastern Massachusetts that apparently is there's several miles in the shape of a triangle where apparently all sorts of spooky stuff happens. We're talking Bigfoot sightings, Thunderbird sightings, and creatures that are called puckwudgies, which is focused on, I believe, a Wampanoag story about little creatures that, or spirits that are known to be mischievous. And goes into a little bit of it. But my favorite story in it is the Omni Parker Hotel, which is an actual hotel. I've been there. It's quite lovely. And it is chock full of ghost stories and weird, crazy history. It has been the residence or staying place of people like, Charles Dickens, JFK, Malcolm X worked there as a busboy for a bit of time in the 40s, and a week before he assassinated Abraham Lincoln, John Wilkes Booth was there, and he apparently went to the hotel manager and asked, like, hey, is there any like shooting range I can like practice at? And they told him, yeah, that's where it is. And so a week later, that stuff happened. And also, apparently, they have a ghost tale that Charles Dickens still haunts the hotel, and there's a certain mirror that if you go to it, I think it's room 13, surprising nobody, and stare at it too long, you can see him reciting A Christmas Carol. So I'm not going to do that because while I like reading about ghosts, I never want to encounter one, even if I don't believe in it. So. Thank you so much, and that's my stuff.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, Parker House is definitely an icon in Boston, home of the Parker House rolls, if anyone's ever had one of those, as well as the inventor of Boston cream pie. Food, it's all about food. So, and Liz, I have to laugh with when your last book, when you said Christopher Knight. I'm, of course, a huge retro television. And when I hear Christopher Knight, I think of Peter Brady from the Brady Bunch. I'm assuming it is not the same Christopher Knight.
It is not the same Christopher Knight, but that would be pretty fantastic. And Louise, yeah, I definitely need to read the Louise Erdrich book. I just have to congratulate Louise, actually co-led a book discussion on that book last week, I believe, right? And had a huge turnout. I think our biggest turnout we've had for a virtual book discussion since we started them in April of 2020. So kudos to Louise, that is awesome. And puts pressure on the rest of the book club facilitators because I don't know if we're gonna beat that. So that is amazing. So of course, this is where we talk about TV shows and movies. And I think we all have a couple that we want to talk about. Liz and I both recently saw a movie. Liz, I don't know if you want to tell your thoughts first. Okay, sure. So for those who are unaware, the library has several Rokus you can check out with Disney Plus subscriptions on them. So I checked one of those out, and my husband and I watched Eternals, which just got released on Disney Plus for no additional fee. It's also out on DVD, but we did the streaming because we're hip millennials. Or something. I don't know. No, we'll fix it in post. Not really. There's no post here. Anyways, Eternals. Wow. That was a mess. It did not feel like a Marvel movie. It felt like a 1980s space fantasy come to earth sort of a thing. I don't know. Honestly, it could have just, the best part about it for me, it was Kumail Nanjiani. I'm a huge Kumail Nanjiani fan. I've been following him since like 2005, 2006. I love his podcasts plural. I love the movies he's written. He and his valet Karen were the highlight of the film to me, and I could have just watched them and the character Fastos for 2.5 hours, like just talking about stuff. But yeah, it was a mess of a movie.
Yeah, I think you pretty much echoed my thoughts. I've not been to too many movies in the theater. And I considered seeing that one, and then I saw the runtime, and I said, and I waited till it got released on Disney Plus. I thought it was about 2 hours and 40 minutes, and it felt very much like a 2 hour and 40-minute movie, if that makes sense. I think if you're going to be more than 2 hours, you need to have a reason. And on the other hand, so I thought there were too many characters. And granted, I don't know the Marvel comics super well from the source material, so I was not as familiar. I was familiar, there are some characters who exist in mythology, or sort of exist in mythology. So like the Icarus was in this, although it's not really the Icarus from Greek mythology. Gilgamesh is in it, and of course, a little different from the Gilgamesh you might know from, it's Beowulf, right? I just realized, bad English major. I should know that off the top of my head, but No, Gilgamesh is his own. Never mind. Sorry. Beowulf is a guy and he fights Grendel. Gilgamesh has his own epic poem, but also not quite the Gilgamesh you remember. And it's, yeah, I really loved both Camille Najani's character as well as Brian Tyree Henry's character, Fastos, who Liz, but we didn't have enough time with them. Like, we actually saw Fastos with his family at one point. He has this really adorable little boy and he's with his husband, and then it's like, oh, this is now finally getting interesting. Well, no, we're not really going to hang out with them. And then Camille Najani, like, he and the so I don't remember any characters' names. He and his valet making basically a documentary about all the Eternals. Like, oh, this is a fun dynamic. Yeah, it was for the 30 seconds we saw it. So it just, and I kept forgetting, like, Angelina Jolie is in this movie. And she's in it a lot, and yet I kept forgetting she was in it, if that makes any sense. I was like, oh yeah, there you are, Angelina Jolie, and your character. She had what could have been a really interesting character arc, but then wasn't. There is a bit of a wink and a nod if you're a Game of Thrones fan, which there's a bit of a love triangle, and two of the ends of it is the guy who played Jon Snow, and the other one is the guy who played Robb Stark, which I didn't even recognize him at first. I didn't realize that was the same person.
I didn't realize that until you said it just now.
I read, like, a week ago, I read a review. I said, oh, that was like, oh yeah, that was him with the different haircut. Okay. And they fight over a woman named Cersei. I get it. But that all went over my head, and I actually have seen Game of Thrones. So it just was, this is a really trite and not a very intelligent review word to say, but I just thought it was so boring. I was texting a friend while I was watching it, and I kept saying, oh God, this movie. And she said, why don't you just stop watching it? And I said, no, but I'm committed now. And I think the problem is there's just too many characters and too many plots and too many ideas into a movie. It probably should have been like one of those 6-hour shows that Disney Plus is doing for Marvel, except I don't think I would have wanted to spend 6 hours with this world. I have yet to meet anyone who's liked it. Liz has seen it, as well as another colleague of ours who I was discussing it with, and so far all three of us seem to have the same opinions. If you did like it, no shame on that at all. That's subjective. Everyone has a right to their opinion. I think there was a kernel of a good movie in there, but I think it just didn't pop.
I do want to clarify, if and when there is an Eternals 2, I will absolutely watch it. Like, I'm not going to be like, I'm done with Eternals forever.
I will too.
Because I just love big superhero action movies, even if they don't make sense. As long as the visuals are good, like, sign me up. And the visuals were pretty good. Very epic, sprawling. The director was very good at scope, I think. Chloe Zhao is good at scope, so.
I agree. And I'm also an MCU completist, so I'm going to want to see it anyway. No, I think in all the other ones, right? I mean, I actually like Thor: The Dark World, but no one else seems to. So I know there's definitely, sorry, hot take, Laura.
So disappointed.
And,
really.
But I know, there's definitely, from the Marvel series, there are a lot of duds. I have to say, I think Age of Ultron may still be my least favorite, but we'll go into that. I will say I did see the new Spider-Man, and I loved that. That was really fun. That unfortunately is still only available in theaters. I felt very comfortable. The theater I went to there was hardly anyone there. I waited till it was actually in the theater for a while. Everybody was masked. It was one of those theaters with large seats. No one was sitting near anyone. But that was very fun. I don't want to say anything more about it because pretty much every scene in there is a spoiler. And in fact, I think the preview spoiled too much even. I wish they hadn't shown as much as they did, but I thought it was a very fun movie. I will say, as you know, I had a very strong reaction to the latest Ghostbusters movie. That I thought was a movie fan service done wrong. I think this Spider-Man No Way Home was fan service done great. So, all right, who else has stuff they would like to share? I know Greg and Louise have both seen things, and Liz has also seen more than what I made her talk about Eternals. So, yeah, go ahead, Louise.
Okay, so there was a lot of snow lately. So I watched some movies. I was watching on Canopy, which you can get through the Waltham Public Library. It's a streaming media platform. It's absolutely free. You can watch it on your computer, your TV, wherever you like. And they have a lot of really good films, a lot of independent films, a lot of feature films, a lot of documentaries, all kinds of great stuff, great courses. I watched, first of all, I watched a movie called The Bookshop, which is based on a novel by Penelope Fitzgerald. And it was filmed in 2017. It's taking place in England in 1959. And the main character, her name is Florence Green. She's a widow. She has a small inheritance from her husband and she wants to open a bookshop. And she opens a bookshop in this very old building in the town. And it's kind of about small town life, but it's also a little about the dark side of small town life. There's a kind of a society woman who wants to open an art center and sort of pulls a lot of strings and uses her connections to try to take the bookshop down. It's a really, really good film. A lot of great books. She gets Lolita at one point, Laura's favorite book. Lolita comes in. It's a new book at the time. Oh, not Laura. Please note that I did not mean that seriously. It is not Laura's favorite book. I just want to be clear on that. Sorry, Laura. But anyway, Lolita's new at the time and she gets it in and she asks this man who is, they all say he's a widower, but he's actually his wife and he separated after about 6 months. And he's kind of a hermit. He's kind of horrified by the politics and the gossip in the small town kind of life. So he's a hermit and he reads all the time. And she gets him books. She gets him Fahrenheit 451 and he loves it and he tells her he wants to get all the Bradbury books delivered. But she asks him to read Lolita for her to tell her if she should have it in the bookstore, because that's obviously, if you haven't read it, it's very odd, racy novel. Anyway, worth reading, but creepy. So he tells her she should have it in the bookshop. So she does, and it actually sells very well. And she's actually making some money. But again, there are people operating, trying to take her down. It's a very, very good movie. I really liked it. Then I watched a weird movie because Laura could probably tell you, I like reading books about people who are ultra religious. I don't know why. I like those kinds of books, and I've watched some films like that too. And this is one about Jehovah's Witnesses. It's called Apostasy, and it's a very good movie. The focus of the movie is a mother and her two daughters, and they're Jehovah's Witnesses. And one of the daughters had to have a blood transfusion when she was very young, and that's against the Jehovah's Witnesses precepts because she's got the blood of someone else in her. And so she's running the risk of getting sick again because they don't believe in transfusions. So we've got one sister like that. We've got another sister who gets pregnant and leaves the Jehovah's Witnesses. And I don't want to tell anymore because I don't want to tell too much about the story, but it's showing the Jehovah's Witness lifestyle and this family and the girls and some of the issues that they face. It's a very good movie. The final one is Ben Stiller and Naomi Watts and Amanda Seyfried. Is that how you say her name? Seyfried? It's called While We're Young. It's very silly. It's kind of funny, silly, very silly. Ben Stiller and his wife, they're getting a little older. They're in their upper 30s. They have friends. Their closest friends have a kid, and all they talk about is their kid and being parents and their kid. But they meet this young couple, a young, ambitious filmmaker and his wife, which is Amanda Seyfried. And it's very funny. They're sort of trying to be younger, and the young, ambitious filmmaker and Ben Stiller, who makes these, seems like very boring documentaries, kind of working together, and some jealousy and intrigue. And it's funny and silly. I recommend it, especially if it's a lot of snow outside. And those are my movies.
I need to take better advantage of Canopy because we have, what a great service we offer here at the Waltham Library. Do you have any TV shows or movies?
Sorry, you broke up there for a bit. I couldn't hear you.
Oh
Um,
gosh.
Yeah. So I got a couple. Let's see. The first one is my wife and I watched the movie What About Bob, starring Bill Murray and Richard Dreyfuss. It's a comedy for those of you who don't know. It focuses on this character Bob, who is, to put it gently, is something of a mess. He does not like going outside. He just stresses about everything. He's overly anxious. He is not good with people. He is it's really hard to be Bob is essentially the way that I'm saying it. And what happens is he comes across this therapist who's coming up in the world, played by Richard Dreyfuss, and he's just has a book called Baby Steps, and it is about him, and he's just about to have like this, he's going to be interviewed and filmed about the success of his book, and you get the sense that, you know, he has a lot of good things going on for him. He's pretty wealthy. He has a house in New Hampshire on one of the lakes. I think it's Lake Winnipesaukee, and he's got a pretty lovely family. And he says he's going to help Bob out, but it really almost seems like it's more to fuel like his own vanity. And unintentionally, he invites Bob over to his vacation house, and Bob meets his family, and the psychiatrist's family immediately falls in love with Bob, and the therapist absolutely hates Bob. And as the story progresses, I don't want to give too much away, but the person who's kind of a wreck and the person who's pretty well put together begin to trade places. And Bill Murray's like just acting very like, he can be very over the top, but he can also be very nonchalant about things. And Richard Dreyfuss's slowly building rage that is so palpable, you can almost like feel it come off the screen, is just it is simply a masterpiece to watch. I don't think I have laughed that hard in such a long time. The last time I laughed that hard was when I was a kid and I had watched my first Mel Brooks movie. So we've come full circle. But so I would totally recommend it. I think it's a blast. I'm just so happy that my wife recommended it to me. So yeah, and I'm pretty tough when it comes to comedy. So just well done. Next thing I watched was I too streamed a Disney show. I watched The Book of Boba Fett, the TV series, you know, it's kind of weird because I've been reading a lot of reviews saying like, oh, this is a disaster. Oh, Disney's getting hit hard, and I'm pretty grumpy when it comes to like Disney, strict when it comes to like Disney stuff, like a hard critic, like when it comes to Star Wars and things like that. I mean, I don't think it's the greatest show, but it's fine. It knows what it's doing. It's about Boba Fett, this bounty hunter who decides that he's going to build a criminal empire, and it's just showing him doing that, and it's just like, yeah, it's fine. I mean, I think if you like if you're comparing it to The Mandalorian, Mandalorian's just gonna win because I just love that show so much, and it's enjoyable. And would I have preferred another season of The Mandalorian? Yeah, as opposed to this? Yes, definitely. Do I hate this show? No. They tried something. Okay, go for it, I guess. There are going to be some points where you're like, and I'm not going to ruin anything, where you're watching this show and you're like, why did they just make another season of The Mandalorian? I don't really understand, but I mean, I don't know, 6 out of 10, a high 6 out of 10, like maybe a 7. Oh, what's this episode? Yep. Well, I can't really. Yeah, that's the part where it started to go. That's why it's not a 7. It's a 6, because And I know, Waltham, you do not understand what I am saying, and I apologize, but it will make a lot more sense if you watch this, where you're like, this is, it's a head scratcher, like not garbage in any stretch of the imagination. It's fun. I can totally see why people are like this. And I don't regret watching this show, but I just am kind of like, oh, okay, I guess this is what you're doing. But yeah, that's what I got. One.
Does it know what it's doing? Does it?
That
I
is
don't
actually
think so.
that's a good point. I think honestly, yeah, you guys do not like it as opposed to me, where but I totally get it. Yeah, I don't know. I think that this Boba Fett has been such like a big Star Wars like character for so many people, despite the fact that he only has like 3 lines in the whole movie, that they wanted to bring him back because they're like, let's have this really cool bounty hunter star in this show. And it's like, you have that. It's called The Mandalorian. You should do that again. But I don't know. It's kind of it's the Diet Coke of The Mandalorian. How about that? You know, it's
like the Crystal Pepsi of The Mandalorian.
wow.
Greg.
That is
I
wow,
just,
you got that.
if I can just interject briefly, the moment the show truly lost me was when Boba Fett, the notorious bounty hunter whose methods were so horrible that even the Empire hesitated to hire him, decided he would adopt a band of teenage sand bikers to act as his muscle against hardened galactic bounty hunter criminals. It's just like, I just didn't. And again, I will keep watching it, but at the same time, like, I would much rather a show about Boba Fett while he was an active bounty hunter just being absolutely horrific, which maybe says a lot about me as a person.
Hey, I don't disagree with you, but I don't think Disney is ever going to do that, unfortunately. I know that's what happens. And this is not a hill that I will die on. So if people come at this, like, this is not something that I am going to say, like, this does not get like my gold star. It's just kind of like, all right, well, it's a show. But I totally see what you're getting at. I guess though, it had Stephen Root and Matt Berry in one episode. So it's really hard for me to hate a show like that, but I get it.
I did like the Thundercat cameo too.
Yeah,
because I love Thundercat. So.
Yeah, it's just one of those. It's a long story short. It's fine, but if you really want like a bounty hunter wandering the galaxy, I'd recommend watching the first 2 seasons of The Mandalorian again, and just wait till the 3rd season comes out. But what about Bob though? That's a good one.
I was gonna say, I don't hate the Book of Boba Fett. I just like, why? I don't get the Boba Fett thing. He was this great. The reason he's a great character is because he's barely in it. Like, he was this mysterious character. This is why fan fiction exists. And he died in that Sarlacc pit. I'm sorry. Like, it's okay. And we also don't. I'm gonna go off it. We don't have to redeem every villain. I mean, come on, wasn't Darth Vader better as Darth Vader and not freaking little Anakin Skywalker? And I think I actually liked Boba Fett in The Mandalorian. When he first appeared there, I said, oh no. But his character was actually very compelling. I like Tamora Morrison, the actor who played Jango Fett in the prequels. Yes, I just gave a compliment to the prequels, believe it or not. But this show, I don't know where the show's going. And the best episode is episode 5, without a spoiler, in which weirdly Boba Fett doesn't appear at all. And I think that unfortunately tells you everything you need to do with the show.
Yeah, it's true.
But I do, and Ming-Na Wen is a favorite of mine. I've been a fan of hers since she was on ER and also in the Joy Luck Club. And I love that she's both in the Marvel universe because of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and in Star Wars. I love it. But just,
yeah, it's a weird one.
But I don't hate it. Like, I'm still like Liz, I'll even watch a 2nd season because I am not Star Wars fan that will like watch everything from Star Wars.
Granted, I kind of have a low bar. Yeah, I have a low bar for Star Wars right now. Like, I was not a fan of the prequels at all, and not a huge fan of the new series. So when I have a show that doesn't make me like go look at the clock, of Star Wars, I'm just kind of like, okay, I guess that's a win. I mean, The Mandalorian I really liked, but Boba Fett, yeah, it's just like, okay, well, it was a story that wasn't great, but it had a beginning, a middle, and an end, and it got point A to point B, and people aren't doing backflips all the time, so okay, sure, I guess. But that's just me. Yeah, but I did not realize I was opening like a door that would lead to. I should have known better. I work with librarians, for God's sake.
I hope everyone will join us for our part 2 discussion of the Book of Boba Fett, which will be airing immediately after this.
Yeah.
Special edition with an important family message at the end.
Liz, did you say you had something else that you had watched that you were doing?
Oh, I watched Wes Anderson's newest film, The French Dispatch. Wes Anderson is very twee. I'm really big on visuals. So again, if a movie is visually like very stunning or well thought out, I will watch it even if like the plot is not great. So I feel like this was one of his weaker films. It's sort of a series of short films that are all tied together as part of this magazine / newspaper called The French Dispatch. Yeah, I don't have much to say other than visually great. There were sections of it that were done in black and white, which had a very sort of Diane Arbus photography feeling, which was kind of cool to me. But yeah, Wes Anderson is just very twee, and I kind of want to live in a Wes Anderson movie. Yeah, that's basically all. It's worth a watch, but it's no Royal Tenenbaums, unfortunately.
Royal Tenenbaums is my favorite Wes Anderson movie by far, and Rushmore is probably my second. So, great, thank you. All right, well, this is fun as always. We hope everyone else enjoyed it. Are you a fan of the Book of Boba Fett? Let us know in the comments. Let's start a debate. I'll be curious what other people say. And please join us live, or if you would like to share your own thoughts on books, please join Louise and our colleague Amber next Monday for Tell Us What You're Reading, as well as all of our book clubs. You can find that if you go on our website under events and then book clubs. You can see our upcoming meetings as well as Zoom links. Everything in February is going to be virtual. Beyond that, please to be determined what will be virtual, what will be in person, if anything. And this will always be on YouTube, and we join us next month. So bye, Zoom wave, everyone. Bye.